I am going to change it up. I'm still going to read the passage that I'd planned on reading this morning. I'm going to be short and I'm going to be very, very sweet. And then I'm going to have a conversation with one of my heroes. And I've never had this sort of conversation with her in church before, but I will say I've been married to her since 1988. And she's going to be sharing a little bit, and it won't be about all the storms I've brought into her life. But if you'd like to turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 4. Very familiar story, an encounter with Jesus that his friends were never, ever going to forget. So Mark chapter 4, verse 35 to 41, the words will be on the screen. And if you'd like a Bible, Mark's just, and the stewards, Nadin is also over there with a Bible if you'd like one. But Mark chapter 4. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also others with him. A furious squall came up and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him." I'm not going to do a full preach this morning. Some of you are relieved. I'm not going to do a full preach. But there's 3 P's in classic Baptist minister training that I'm going to give you this morning. 3 P's that I think we all need reminding of. And I think it's already been there in the service this morning. In the middle of the storm, Jesus was present. He was there. His people would know the word in the scriptures that said, "Even if I go to the highest heights, you are there. And even if I go to the deepest depths, you are there." They would have remembered David's famous Psalm 23, where David talks about going through the deepest, darkest valley. In older language, the valley of the shadow of death. And it says that even there, God will be present. You see, the Good Shepherd doesn't wave us off into the valleys and say, "Good luck, I'll hopefully see you the other side." We have a shepherd who goes with us into the deepest depths, who goes with us into the valleys. He promises to be present. He says, "I will never leave you or forsake you." There they are in the middle of a storm, and that storm must have been terrified, because I'm pretty sure there were some experienced crewmen, experienced fishermen on board that ship, on board that boat, and yet in the midst of it, even they are overwhelmed. And you and I get overwhelmed, don't we? Let's be honest. You and I get scared. You and I get frightened. And even when we get scared and when we get frightened and when we're uncertain, He is still consistent and He's still constant. He is faithful to His words. When all around you appears to be absolute chaos and uncertain, Jesus is there. He's present. But this story also reveals his power. There's power in this story. Yes, quite literally power to quieten a storm. But I wonder this morning if we're really, truly aware that most of the storms, not all, but most of the storms in our lives are of our own making. Yes, there's the sins done against us. And yes, there are the circumstances that we would not have chosen. And all of that is true. But actually, most of the storms in my life, or at least many of them, have been of my own making. My lack of peace, my lack of ability to make the right choice sometimes, to act and live as God has created me to, that's down to me. And the Bible has a word for that. It's not very popular in our culture, but the word is sin. It really means to fall short of the mark. I'm messed up, I'm screwed up, I get it wrong. And sometimes the consequence of that is that there's an inner storm, an inner disquiet that actually might be necessary to draw me closer to God and draw me back to Him. But here's the thing. Those things that we think disqualify us from having the King of heaven and earth live in us as a friend, He has power over that sin. He has power over that failure. He has power over that guilt because He paid the price on the cross. And even more than that, He has the power to help you and me live as we were created to live. Those habits, those addictions, those things in your life that stop you being a true carrier of the image of God, those things, by the power of the Holy Spirit, can be transformed and changed. He can quieten the storm of the power of sin, not just by forgiving the past, but by filling you with His presence now so that you can live this new life in God's kingdom. God's peace and power. And that's the final one, God's peace. God's presence, God's power, God's peace. And right now, many of us need that, don't we? In fact, we all need it. Firstly, we need to know that we actually have peace with our God through Jesus Christ. And I want to encourage you this morning, if you haven't yet made your peace with God, He wants to make it with you because He's already done the work to do that. But Jesus spoke. He just spoke a word, and there was peace. Presence, power, peace. God's invitation to some of us this morning is be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. He wants to speak peace into your heart, into your situation. All of that is true. But life is just sometimes more complicated than that, isn't it? Because the reality is we don't live in a world that is very peaceful. My heart's not always peaceful. My circumstances are not always peaceful. But the world we live in is not always peaceful. So I'm going to have a conversation with Louise. So if Louise could come and join me at the front here. Give her a round of applause, because grab her. Whichever one you like.
Hello.
So, everyone knows you're married to me. And they'll probably give you a medal later. But just really, really quickly, you wore a number of hats when we were living in South Africa. Just so you know, today is 6 months exactly since we stepped on a plane to leave South Africa to come and fly here. So thank you for your welcome, and it is great to be here. We miss South Africa deeply, but we know God has called us here, and I pray you still feel the same. Um, So Louise, just really, really briefly, lots of different hats you wore, but just tell us about what you did with Beautiful Gate.
So Beautiful Gate is a non-profit organisation that works to show God's love and demonstrate God's love and presence in one of the bigger townships in Cape Town called Philippi. And I was on the leadership team, and I was the programme manager for child health. And one of the main things we did is we supported the local clinic in running their child and adolescent HIV service, with a main focus on running treatment support clubs for teenagers with HIV. So that's my main role.
And how many children and youth roughly were involved were you connected with and their families?
In the clinic, there was about 550 young people, and from naught to sort of early 20s who attended that service.
So Philippi is a community where there are a lot of storms.
Yeah.
You know, we've just read about the storm that came up over the lake, and Jesus was in the boat in the middle of that storm. But do you want to just describe some of the storms that were raging in a community like Philippi?
So the storms are, as you can see, poor housing, poverty, overcrowding, lack of employment, lack of opportunities, with all that comes with that, you know, teen pregnancy, poor educational opportunities, high levels of crime, high levels of violence, high levels of gender-based violence. It's just a very, very... I've not seen so many dead bodies as I've seen in Philippi.
I actually took the opportunity this week to have a look. The murder rate in London is 1.6 per 100,000 people. That's 1.6. That's every year. That's 1.6 too many. Right now, if you live in Kyiv, in the Ukraine, which is in the middle of war, so I'm not talking about the rest of, I'm not talking about Donbass, where there's actual direct armed conflict, but if you live in Kyiv right now, it's just over 6 per 100,000 in a year. So it's about 5 times higher than London, 4 or 5 times higher than London. I'm going to give you a staggering statistic for the place where Louise was working. 320 per 100,000, 50 times higher than a war zone. 50 times higher, nearly, than Kyiv. So that means you're working with people and families that almost everyone has been touched by death as a result of violent crime.
Yeah, it's a very traumatized community with chronic trauma over many generations, and we can go into the reasons for that.
And if you ever want to talk to us about the reasons, you can talk to us about the reasons. It's really, really complex and difficult, but that's the reality. People are living with extreme poverty, lack of opportunity, and levels of violence that are higher than a war zone. So it's a community that experiences high levels of trauma. But there was a moment, wasn't there, Louise, where the reality of that got brought closer to home for you, where the storm became more personal. Do you want to explain to everyone what happened?
So it's a small story in comparison with a lot of very, very big stories. But I'm going to just read from I used to journal from time to time, and I'm just going to read from my journal from the 8th of May 2023, because it's probably the easiest way to do this. I'm writing this at home, sitting on my bed. I went to work as usual this morning, a Monday morning, so I was a little anxious, but praying and singing in the car. I was running late because it was foggy, and there was a 15-minute traffic hold-up at Sunrise Circle. I was driving carefully, but also giving my frustration at being late for the clinic to God, because I hate being late. And I could have avoided the traffic if I'd have taken an earlier turn, and I didn't. Yet I realized I needed to respond with patience and worship rather than anger and frustration. There's a section of my drive as you leave Mitchell's Plain and go into Philippi that's particularly dangerous. And I always pray through this part of my drive. I was stuck in traffic at the robots, traffic lights to you guys, where things are particularly anarchic. For some reason, something caught my attention and I turned my head towards the passenger side of the car. The next moment, there was a loud bang and a huge rock whistled past my right ear, landing in front of the gear stick. The glass of the driver's window was broken, but held together with smash and grab plastic. A hand came through the hole, grabbed the keys in the ignition and was shouting, "Where's your phone?" They stalled the car, but I was able to reach forward and still turn the key that was in the ignition, restart the car, move into a space on the right side, do a U-turn on the other side of the road. I drove to Beautiful Gate. I felt very shaky. I could see my right ear was bleeding a little bit, but otherwise I was okay. I was escorted to the police station. The policewoman was very young who took my statement. I went back to Beautiful Gate, and Goodmore, Massey and Sabello helped me to tape up the window so I could drive home. I feel a bit shaky now. And now I just feel a bit numb. I guess that's just part of the reaction to something that's a bit traumatic. I look at the rock. It's sitting there in front of the gear stick. It's part of a broken breeze block. And I realize it could have hit my head or my face. It could have caused me some damage. Instead, it whistled past my ear and landed there. And I'm so grateful that my head was turned looking to the other side, or it would have hit me in the face. I'm so grateful the glass was held together with smash and grab laminates, so it made it hard for them to get through the window. And then it protected me from more of the flying glass shards. I'm so grateful there was a gap I could turn into, and that they didn't get the keys and open up the car, which has happened to me before. A month earlier, a woman had been killed by a rock hitting her head in the same way as it came through the window. I am so grateful for God's hand of protection over me. That rock is a testimony. That rock was meant for harm, but that rock is a testimony of God's protection over me. It's a small story. I mean, it's one of... We know that when you work in a community like that, when you work in these, places, you get closer to the things that people face every day. And most of my colleagues lived in the area, and they faced this every single day. Every single day. I only had to face it maybe twice a week when I went to the clinic, and where Beautiful Gate was situated was slightly less in the heart of where the stuff was. But things definitely, the amount of violence definitely escalated after COVID. And so this was perhaps the worst thing.
I want to bring this into land, Louise. How do you, in the middle of a storm like that, not just the personal storm, but the storm, it seems like a never-ending storm of poverty and violence and trauma, how do you and others keep going?
When I was thinking about this, I wrote down 3 things. The first was just sort of practical help. The practical things of being supported and being helped to do your job in a way that kind of minimises some of the risks. But the 2 big things are knowing that I was called. I've always known. I had always known that I was called to work with Beautiful Gate. The ways of me getting there and meeting the people I did when I did. I knew I was called to work in that place. And that gave me great strength, I guess, and courage, because I knew that that's where God wanted me, and I knew that God was present with me when I went there. And so that was one thing. The other was having other people in the boat. At Beautiful Gate, we supported one another. You know, we were all in the same boat, facing the same levels of challenge. You know, the people who went into the schools faced people going in and robbing them at gunpoint. You know, we faced the same challenges, and we prayed together. We lamented together. When people had bereavements, we came round each other and supported each other. And we prayed not just with ourselves, but we also invited the community to come and pray. And so in that way, I feel that we were really showing God's presence in the community.
So in many ways, it wasn't only you knowing God's presence, it's actually the decision to stay and serve there comes from knowing that God has called you.
Yes.
And in itself is actually saying God is still present with this community because God's people are choosing not to abandon it despite the circumstances. And you also discovered God's peace, and I think we all need to hear this, by being in community with others. We need one another. You cannot get through life, and you definitely can't follow Jesus on your own. You and I need each other. We might fall short in our relationships with one another, but my word, do we need each other in the boat? And there are times when I need you to remind me that Jesus is in the boat, and there are going to be times when you need me to remind you that Jesus is in the boat. We need one another, the power of community. That's how Jesus often expresses his presence to us. The other thing that I want to take out of Louise's story as an illustration this morning is that sometimes this side of eternity, the storm doesn't stop raging. This side of eternity, the storm does not stop raging. And I think the ultimate message in that story is that there is a day coming where there will be total peace. And God will speak over all creation and say, be quiet, be still. The book of Revelation tells us that the city of Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem, is coming down from heaven. And when Jesus returns, he is going to restore his creation, and he's going to make everything new, and there'll be no more pain, no more suffering, no more dying, no more death, because the old order of things will have passed away, and for the rest of eternity, there will be that stillness and peace that Jesus spoke in the midst of that storm over that sea that day. We haven't arrived at that moment yet. And so we will still face the storms of disappointment. We will still face the storms of grief and loss. We will still confront and live through the storms of abandonment, of job losses, of sickness, and so much more, because we live in a world that is lost and broken. But he promises his presence, his power, and the promise not only of peace now, but of eternal peace. That's the good news for us this morning. He is with you in your boat, and he's not going to abandon you, and he is going to see you home safely as you walk with him and allow him and give him permission to stay in the boat with you. We're going to listen to a song, and and then Louise is going to lead us in prayer. Oh, yeah. Oh, I mustn't forget that. Yeah, hold on. Before we listen to the song, Louise has just reminded me, you might want to know what happened to the rock that went through the car window. Where is that, Louise?
It actually came all the way from South Africa with us. I decided the guys at the car repair place said, what do you want to do with this? I said, I want to keep it. You know, sometimes when something bad happens, you actually want to do something good with the bad thing. And I felt very strongly, this rock was called But God. I wrote a little poem a couple of days after the event, and I said, but God, I was in danger, but God rescued me. I was attacked, but God delivered me from those bent on evil. I could have been hurt, but God sent his angels to protect me. I could have been killed, but God brought me out unharmed. The rock that should have hit me did not. The rock that was part of an evil plan is now my testimony of God's goodness to me. And I will call this rock But God.
It's in the garden at the manse if you ever want to come and see it. So a constant memorial to the truth of God's goodness and God's faithfulness. And actually it's a planting there, isn't it? It's put there amidst all that life. And it's a picture of the future hope that we have as well. That all the pain and all the suffering that we might endure in this life, won't count for nothing in eternity. God will transform it into something beautiful and glorious. And if you know Christ today, he's already started that work in you. Let's listen to a song, and then Louise is going to lead us in prayer.
Jesus, when you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up and calm this raging sea? Jesus, when you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up? How can you sleep when we're in need? Just one word from the Maker, in all the ways be still. Just one touch from the Healer, and all will be made well. So Jesus, when you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up and calm this raging sea? Jesus, when you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up? How can you sleep when we're in need? Just one word from the Maker, and all the ways will be made still. Just one touch from the Healer, and all will be made well. Just one word from the Maker, and all the ways will be made still. Just one touch from the Healer, and all will be made well. Jesus, when you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up? How can you sleep when we're in need? So won't you rise up? Won't you rise up? Won't you rise up? Won't you rise up? Won't you rise up?
Let's bow our heads in prayer. Dear Lord, for those who are going through a storm right now, the storm of loss, bereavement, and grief, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. For those going through the storm of brokenness, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. For those going through the storm of violence, through war, in communities, within families, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. For those going through the storm of sickness, physical and mental ill health, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. For those going through the storm of job loss, unemployment, poverty, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Jesus, King of the whole cosmos, the Word through whom the wind and the waves and us were created, the Saviour of the whole world. We are in a storm, and we cannot save ourselves or stop the boat from sinking. Wake up and calm the storm raging around us and within us. Help us, Lord, to recognize who is in the boat with us, because that changes everything. Amen.